believe it or not, we're all on a journey right now. It's a 10-day trip, and we're on day 10. It started at the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, and it ends at the end of Yom Kippur this evening. This much we already know, right? Nod your head if you know this already. Okay. Now leave if you don't know. It's okay. Stay. We're actually less familiar with the people who set up this trip. That is, those who wrote the itinerary. We don't really know all of their names, but we know that they put a whole lot of time and a whole lot of energy into setting up this structure. Somewhere behind the scenes, some of them were telling stories, some were writing those tales down in the Bible, and others lived 1,000 years later talking about it and mapping it out in rabbinic literature, what we generally call the Talmud. And here we are, 2,000 years later, left to guess how they came up with this big idea. So let's use our imagination. Let's picture them all in the same room at the same time. It's not a huge room. It's small enough that everyone can hear everyone else's voice. It's a lively group conversation resulting in this thing that we now call the High Holy Days. A few tables that are filled with the smartest Jews of all ages, countless generations, packed into one small space. One leading figure comes to the front of the room and he announces, "Our mission is clear. No one leaves this room until we plan a major holiday, grander than any other, one that gets our whole community thinking about the most important questions in life." That's it. Let the conversation begin. It doesn't take long for someone else to chime in with the first question. "Okay, so how many days is this thing going to be?" One sage chimes in with an answer. 7. After all, there are 7 days in creation. The group isn't so impressed. "Nah, 7 already gets enough attention. There are 7 days in the week," says one voice. "We need a different number, a bigger one." A wise student calls out, "Ooh, how about 10? The group says, 10? Why 10? "Well," says the student, 10 after the 10 Commandments. If this is really about helping people figure out what their purpose is, why not 10? 10 days to figure out what we have to do with our precious lives. The group loves it. Next question. How should it begin? The crowd is chattery. Everyone has an opinion. One guy stands on a table to get everyone else's attention. "We begin with the creation of the universe itself. Let's pretend we're all being born. The world itself is being born." Someone challenges that answer. But wasn't the world only created once? I mean, how can we recreate the world that already exists? "Ah," the man on the table replies, "we call it Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, to remind us of just that to begin a year means to make believe that we're being born again, with God creating the world all over and over again. This way, we'll stay forever young. We can spend the rest of the time with so much energy." The group loves the idea. What's not to love? Rosh Hashanah it is. There was one person in the back who wasn't entirely sold, and he raised his hand and he said, "Well, can we eat something sweet?" "Like what?" they said. "Like maybe honey?" "Okay, sure." He said, "Maybe apples too?" He said, "Okay, fine." So apples and honey became the custom. The group gets very quiet until one person has the courage to ask the question that's kind of on everybody's mind. "What about the end of the 10 days?" Silence. "Hello? Why are you guys being so quiet? It was the first moment in the history of the Jewish people that a room filled with Jewish people was entirely quiet. Eventually, the elder in the group speaks up. We have to allow that to be the end. The room is still silent. Awkward. He continues, it'll be a day when we fast, when we deny nourishment to our bodies, to our bones, and remind ourselves that life is really short. Eventually, the youngest in the group calls out, what a downer. He objects, let's let this day be all about renewal and birth. Another voice from the back piles it on. Yeah, come on, old man, let's stay positive. The elder responds, but isn't this too part of the picture of life? Why would we want to pretend otherwise? Listen, says the old man, I'm the elder of this group. Most of my elders have already passed on. I love them. I think about them every single day. They are with me as much as you guys are with me. Shouldn't they too belong in these 10 days? A few heads begin to nod. And besides, he continues, I just got over being sick. It was the scariest time of my life. And I'll tell you what, being sick and then being healthy actually made me pretty grateful to be here. The old man had won over most of the group, but a few heads still suggested that they needed convincing. So a wise student in the group, a disciple of his, chimed in. How about a compromise? We keep the last day as a reminder of how fragile life is. We'll call it Yom Kippur, a day of atonement when realizing how limited our time here is, we apologize, we tell our friends and our family that we love them. The contrarian objects again. What kind of compromise is that? The disciple answers, because at the very end of Yom Kippur, at the very end, we'll blow the shofar. We will eat. We will nourish ourselves. The group was almost convinced, and the disciple continued, and we'll have bagels. After Yom Kippur, after the 10 days, it'll feel like we've journeyed through life and come back to life renewed and refreshed the way we feel after eating breakfast. Hey, we'll even call that meal break fast. How about that? A 10-day journey from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, from birth to death to life to bagels. Finally, and for the first time in Jewish history, all the sages nodded their heads in agreement. I know. So that's how we might imagine our ancestors handing us this tradition of ours. But the thing is, questions still remain. How will the people use this tradition? What's going to happen in those days for each of them and for all of them? What questions will people ask? You see, the gift of the High Holy Days is not about the answers that are handed down to us, but about the questions that we're invited to raise up. So like the sages in the story, we are all here, packed in a room, figuring it out for ourselves. And carrying into this space, we have our own questions and our own confusions. How do I get from here to there? How can I stop doing this or that? How can I do more of this or that? Who am I? And who am I going to be in a year from now? We each have our own High Holy Day journeys. So how do we find our way? In the essential Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson, the cartoon character Calvin says to his tiger friend Hobbes, I feel bad that I called Susie names and hurt her feelings. I'm sorry I did it. Maybe you should apologize to her, Hobbes suggested. Calvin ponders this for a long moment and then replies, I keep hoping there's a less obvious solution. Yom Kippur is really, really hard work. Apologizing, saying I'm sorry, figuring out what we have to say I'm sorry for, and then doing it is hard work. Confessing is really, really hard work. And sometimes, when we want to restore our friendships and our relationships with each other, with ourselves, with God, sometimes we find ourselves seeking less obvious solutions. So when we confess, as we will do in just a moment, we do so together. We do so as one community to make sure that we're not seeking out the less obvious solutions, making it so hard on ourselves that we don't see the path to saying I'm sorry and the path to making things better for ourselves and for everyone around us. Sometimes we just have to figure out what to say. Sometimes we say these words for ourselves, and sometimes we're saying these words for other people that need a little bit of help. But when we say vidui, when we say confessional, as we say now, on page 26, we all confess as one community, helping each other along, keeping ourselves from seeking less obvious solutions, seeing what's in front of us. We offer vidui, we offer confession.